Hello, everybody. So I'm here today with John Omoti, who's head of supply chain finance at the Bank of China in London. Welcome, John.
Thank
And we're talking to John in advance of our supply chain finance summit, which will take place on the 26th of April in London. And John, I've got a few questions for you in relation to the session that you'll be joining at the summit. And the first thing I want to ask you is, how do you feel the pandemic has affected the supply chain finance market, if at all? Have you seen any significant changes? And before you answer that, let me just give you my thoughts on it. It seems to me that the volumes and the use funds in use figures for supply chain finance in the last 18 months or so have significantly increased. I'm getting this information from our work we've done on our supply chain finance report. What have you seen?
Yeah, that is true. I think most organizations like us, I think we're bouncing back from the effect of the pandemic, where banks were very, very cautious in terms of their risk appetite in loaning to various corporates, despite the increase in transactions or requests for loans. And that's I'm very, very cautious. But I think now banks are beginning to open up, even like us. So yes, I think you're right in saying that those initial parameters, which we use in learning to corporate, I think we'll begin to reduce some of those restrictions and opening up to more corporates to come in and providing them funding concerning supply chain finance. So I think that is very, very crucial because the risk threshold has reduced significantly. So banks are opening up now, including us, and we are now able to lend to more corporates and open our doors to more corporates within the UK market.
Do you expect this trend to continue, or do you think this is more related to a kind of bounce back from the pandemic period?
It will continue. I think it's a bit of both. Bounce back from the pandemic, that is true. The market is getting back to what it used to be. It's slowly recovering. I think that's where we are heading. So I think it's going to continue. The trajectory is going to continue to grow. And we're going to have more business. I'm going to see more of our corporate clients. And we are now willing to lend a little bit more to some of them because those stringent positions we've taken concerning some industries within the aviation space and also other sectors which has been challenging. I think we'll begin to be more open to supporting those industries.
Mm. And there's also been talk about a shift in dynamics in terms of the relationships between large buyers and small suppliers. Um, have you seen that? And can you just describe that and tell me what it means in your view?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because in cost of engaging with some of our large clients or large buyers when we offering them payable finance solution, one of the things we observe is they've taken a view rather than sign up to banks proprietary platform, and they've taken a view of having a multi-bank system whereby they dictate to the banks where we need to sign up to. Now, we were pitching to them, sign up to our own platform, but now they are saying, no, if you want our business, sign up to a multi-bank platform where you can access our trade finance assets. So I think they are beginning to dictate the tune and where we need to move in the right direction. During the pandemic, we were looking at blockchain as one of our digital initiatives, and one of the blockchain consortium which we chose, I think they basically dictated to us because most of our corporates were using one particular solution. We have to sign up to the solution. So that is one of the huge change we have seen today. Unlike back in days when I was several years ago, we had our own platform and we dictated where they need to sign up to. That is changing. Concerning small suppliers, I think supply chain is becoming more financially inclusive, where we're like most of the supply chain programs, you tend to exclude most of the small suppliers. But you begin to find today more inclusiveness in terms of our supply chain finance offering, and you begin to have more our MBFI coming to the space, fintech coming to the space and providing strategic funding to some of those suppliers or smaller suppliers which seem to have been excluded maybe by some of the banks.
And what about ESG? You know, that is something which everybody seems to be so focused on at the moment. Can you just give us some information about the policies around disclosure of sustainable practice, and what kind of issues are banks coming up against, particularly in their supply chain finance structures and offerings, in terms of implementing ESG requirements?
Yeah, disclosure is quite important because you're looking at providing data relating to your environmental, social, and governance performance. Those are key indicators for your investors to make appropriate right decisions. In terms of policies, bank and ours, for instance, is something we're actively promoting. We had several meetings and which we want to start promoting going forward because it's in line with what the current policy, what the current guidance has provided, and begin to see a situation whereby most of our business proposals today always has an ESG element built into those business proposals. Without it, it might be very difficult to get approval. So it's becoming very, very crucial. You want to know exactly what the corporate is doing concerning the environmental, how the goods being sourced. There's a change of mindset today, such that you look at how the goods being sourced, are they sourced sustainably, and within the supply chain, and the social element are all, like we talked about suppliers, are everyone included? Do you have that social inclusion within your supply chain, and everyone is catered for within the supply chain, so that those large buyers now begin to think not just about the product that comes to them, but all the way down to the small suppliers. How are they being treated? Are they working in a friendly environments? Are they child laborers in those? What are they working environments? All that is being factored in today into the most of the large buyers and supply chain. They're thinking about, and they're putting some pressure on some of those large suppliers to basically adhere to it, which is very, very important. The social element is quite key. There's a lot of focus on the environmental, which I don't want to elaborate, which most people know about. The social element is very, very, very important. Also, the governance aspect of it, which looks into how your organization is structured to support ESG initiatives. So that is the way future. I know that there's been some developments in terms of some papers being written, or some governance are beginning to put in place certain policies which becomes mandatory for large buyers to have to factor in how their supply chain is being protected.
And what about cost of implementing all this? How is this impacting the cost of putting together supply chain finance structures, and are those costs being passed on to clients, to corporates and suppliers, or is it not a big cost to put these to implement these initiatives?
Personally, I don't think it's a huge cost. Yes, I know that there's some cost in terms of having to monitor those ESG initiatives, because sometimes you have to look into your supply chain and how the goods are being sourced. It does involve some cost in itself. It might involve having to visit some of those sites itself in a different region. So those are different costs which will have to occur. But I do think it's not a huge issue for most of those large buyers or large suppliers to factor that into their own costs. I think, I don't think it's a huge issue from my perspective.
Sure. So the cost aspect will be probably minimal for banks and providers of finance, more on the corporate and supplier side, in terms of what they have to do.
That is correct. On the bank side, I think we're actively encouraging banks to showcase what they do in terms of their ESG initiatives. Because we are all looking at possibility of offering incentives, additional incentives for some of these clients of ours who are actually involved in actively promoting ESG initiatives. So in terms of cost, we are happy to bear most of those additional costs. It's not really much, it's just a small margin, but at least it's just to show that the banks are actually out there to encourage banks to think about more about their sustainabilities agendas.
Okay, and just want to ask you a bit about digital transformation. As we know, there's still a huge amount of paper out there in terms of invoicing and other aspects of related to that, purchase orders, etc. Do you see that holding up the development of supply chain finance markets? And would you like to see the speed of digital transformation increasing? Because it's a major part, isn't it, of supply chain finance structures. It's important that these processes are digitized, and the transfer of data between suppliers, corporates, and banks. That's an essential part of keeping costs down, isn't it? And the way that platforms are structured for that. So, what's your view on that in terms of how can we get digital transformation more fully complete in global trade?
Yes. This transformation is an interesting one because it's the buzzword now. Everyone is really thinking about it. All directors of companies are thinking about how to digitize their offering. And what comes to mind when you think about digital transformation is just, okay, let's invent a new technology. Let's install a new technology. Let's go into digital marketing, or let's go into some form of automated solution process. Yes, it's not all that. It's a combination of everything, basically. So it's not just about one technology. You're looking about creating something that is new or amending a new process itself, which affects the business processes, the culture, and also looking at the customer's experiences. So it's not just one smart technology, but you're looking at what is technology aimed at achieving. The people around the organization, the mindset will have to change and start thinking about digital technology. That is very, very important. That talking about the culture of the organization. Some organizations are very, very myopic, or they're very say ancient now, but it's very mundane. But the mindset has to change. You have to think about changing the business model. All that has to be factored into it. But I think that is definitely the way forward. In other words, because it's times are moving, and everyone has to get in line with the digital initiative. Because if nothing, we've learned the pandemic has been something that has been a kick for us, because we have to think back and say, oh, how do we make this process more efficient? We're all working from home. We can't be in the office, and we need to get access to physical documents, kind of physical document system. Those were challenges. And I think that motivation should not end. It should continue. That drive should continue within that trade finance space, which has we've been on this industry for being manual processing for a long time. So it's really time for us to move into that digital space and ensure our processes, which will give the clients a unique experience, should be factored into. I know there's a lot of complications. There are a lot of macroeconomic issues which we have to deal with, such as the legal aspects, the standardization issues. But that shouldn't still stop us. We just need to keep on pushing on and resolve each of the issues from top down approach. I think until we get to where we can transact. And there was an article that talks about I read something about just 0.1% of EB lending was issued in 2020, which is really, really, really low. That has to change. We'll begin to see up to 30-40% EB lending being issued electronically.
Sure. These things always take longer than expected. But John, we very much look forward to exploring these themes further and in more depth where we have some more time, and with your fellow panelists at our Supply Chain Finance Summit, as I mentioned before, on the 26th of April in London. So until then, John and Marty, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.